Good evening. My name is Nathally Munoz Velasquez. I am currently one of Ms. Dion Stefan's student in psychology of women and gender. Today, I'm going to be talking about an article that I found in the New York Times. It is called "In the Male World of Whiskey, More Women Are Calling the Shot." Though sexism is still rampant, a number of women are now distilling, blending, and reshaping the business in their image. This article was written by Clay Ryson and published July 1st, 2021. So the article basically talks about the role that women have had in the history of whiskey, the distilling of whiskey, how they have had to overcome discrimination, all types of discrimination, weird myths, and how they have continued to work on the reshaping of the image of this type of profession. As we know, whiskey is a male dominated profession. So it has not been easy for this woman to not only be part of the business, in the backstage, but to come to the front and actually um, change that image, show their capacities as natural super tasters, as individuals that have all the knowledge and capacity to distill and make really good whiskey. So basically that's the what the article talks about. Now, when it comes to course concepts, there are plenty of relevant concepts that have that can be seen in the article. However, I'm only going to talk about four, which are sexism and microaggressions that can be found in Chapter 2, Power and Privilege, and gender stereotyping and social construction theories, which are found in Chapter 5, Gender Socialization. So starting with sexism is a type of discrimination towards an individual due to his, her gender or sex, right? So when it comes to the article, the entire article talks about sexism, how this woman have to that work in this type of profession have to overcome mean comments in the social media, how they have to be underappreciated for what they do, how they are mostly um, believed backstage. So that that talks a lot about sexism. However, I do want to bring out a specific art example that has to do with the experience that the founders of Milan and Green, which is a distillery in Blanco, Texas, an experience that they had when they went to the San Antonio Cocktail Conference in 2018. These women, they got there and they saw that their table was all the way to a corner and way far from the action. That's sexist. That's underappreciate their value of why they were actually there, why they were part of that gathering. So, which is a really important gathering because that's like the largest gathering of bartenders and distillers in Texas. But not only were they left to a corner, but they also had to listen to comments of men that were in the same gathering of like asking why are they here, who are them, things like that. That's that's also sexist. So it's not only the fact that they are left behind, that the work in these distilleries are left focus, or that they have to go through all this mean comments on social media or even in the gatherings, is the fact that their role, which is really important in the story of whiskey, is completely unappreciated. It's completely left behind. It's taken as unnoticed. So that's sexism. That's discrimination. Moving on to microaggressions, with which is also in chapter two, the fact that these women um, had to hear mean comments like, "What are they doing here? Who are them?" That those are microaggressions. To be more specific, microaggressions are common behaviors or comments, or attitude, actions that can be intentional or unintentional, and in some way discriminate an individual due to his or her gender as well. These microaggressions are very common in workplaces where male are more dominant. So, of course, distilling whiskey is a male dominating profession. It's not a profession where it's very common to find women. Actually, not a lot of women drink whiskey. So it's a workplace, or an environment where it's very easy to find this type of discrimination, like it's microaggressions. However, moving on, um, and leaving a little bit to the side the experience that these women from Mylan and Green had at the gallery in San Antonio, I also wanted to bring out another example that has to do with an experience that happened to Victoria Edie Butler, which happens to be the first African American woman to become a master blender. So Victoria is in a gathering as well, and with surrounded by, I guess, plenty of men that have to do with business. And she comes up to this man and gives him her hand. And the first thing that this man does is he steps away. He steps back, eh, like it's not with me. Which that's a type of microaggression. Um, but not only that, but once they start talking, the first one of the comments that this man does makes is, "Oh, you're that taster girl." That's how he refers to Victoria, who happens to be the first African American master. She's a master blender, and he says, "Oh, you're that taster girl." That's microaggression. That's discrimination. That's mm, putting her value, her capacity under un, unappreciated. So that's which is also a way of sexism. It's a way of underestimating another individual's capacities or value. Moving on to chapter 5, we have gender stereotyping. Gender stereotyping is a generalized belief of the roles and behaviors that a person should have according to its gender. Um, so The most interesting thing about this article is that it talks about women that work um, in a profession that is completely male dominated. So goes, it challenges gender stereotyping. However, the fact that they have to go through so many comments, so many discrimination, through so many things, demonstrates that gender stereotyping is still there, even though they have done a great job working on the reshaping of the image of this type of profession. So I want to start with a little bit of story um, regarding how gender roles in in whiskey story. So long time ago, woman's duties, like woman considered woman home duties, were in part what one of the duties that a woman had to do at their home was distilling. And even it's actually well known that plenty of women used to distill to make medicine, which then they were also um, said that they were witches and then they would be burned alive and all that stuff. But it was part of their home duties. However, well, actually, before I move on, I also want to bring out some very important woman in the 19th century who happened to be the first person to record a recipe for the sour mash whiskey, which that's huge. And her name was Catherine Spears Fry. So if it wasn't for Catherine, probably a lot of the story of whiskey wouldn't have developed in the way it did. So that marks that gives us a glimpse of how important women have been in the story of whiskey. However, moving on to gender stereotyping. So after the Civil War, the gender roles became more limited for women. Women were no longer well seen to be working in a distillery, um, or those type of jobs. So they were more limited to the house, taking care of the children, the cooking, the cleaning, that type of things. So that shows how those, like, not only how it changes, how the roles change it over time, but why now, even today, even all the things that society, that our culture has gone through, even today, it's it's weird. It's not usual to see a woman working as a blender in a whiskey distillery. It's not well seen, or it's not considered to be good. Another thing that I want to bring out when it comes to gender stereotype is all the myths that have surrounded women and distilling, because that's also a way to stereotype. That's also a way to discriminate, and it's actually pretty sad, because it's a way to discriminate women due to their natural yeah their natural processes. So it is known that plenty of women that were working in distilleries not long time ago, of course not in the front part, but like in backstage, were told that when they were in their period, they were not allowed to go to the distillery because that would mess up the yeast. So that's also a way of stereotyping. That's also a way of discrimination. That's sexism as well. That's microaggression as well, because even though it was probably said without the intention of discriminating or insulting, it's probably due to ignorance. It was microaggression. It's discrimination. And so before I move on to the next concept, I believe that all of these concepts, sexism, gender stereotyping, and microaggressions, are all related, and they all build up this huge concept of discrimination. And in part, I believe it's because of this concept I'm gonna bring, which is social construction theories, which we can find in chapter 5. So before I move on into what are social construction theories, first want to talk about what is social learning. So social learning is how a person talks about how an individual's knowledge is constructed based on her culture and time. So moving on into social construction theories, what they state is that social learning is different for um, each individual depending on that person's culture. Well, each culture sets up has its own sets of beliefs that they a set of beliefs that inform people of how they have to behave and how they have to interact in all this, at the same time that they establish according to their gender, how people have to behave according to their gender. And in that way they establish and maintain a specific social economic systems and inequalities. So basically what we're saying here is that we are what we learn, and we learn in accordance to what our culture believes is right. So if our culture states that women should not be working at a whiskey distillery, then it's not well seen for a woman to do it. If our culture states that women are only to raise children and clean the house and wait for her husband to get home and serve dinner, then that's what we are mentally set up to believe and to live. We live in around that belief. So I wanted to leave this concept for the last because I believe it bring like it captures the other concepts. And also because it has to do a lot with the future considerations that I talk about next. But before I talk about those future considerations, I did want to mention once again, because I find it very important, and very important, and to point out the role this woman has had in the in this profession. I mean, not only the fact that she's a woman, is the fact that she's also a woman of color in a culture that has a large history of racism and discrimination against not only women but African Americans. So I believe it's a huge step for Victoria to become the first African American master blender. It it shows a lot. So now moving on to my future considerations, I believe it's important for us to get educated and educate others, as we have to learn how to see things from different perspectives. We have to learn how to change our mindset. We have to learn how to have a more open vision of things. And I think it's not only men. I believe that women have a lot to do in this as well. A lot of women are not, like, they don't acknowledge how much capacities, how much talent they have, and they limit themselves because they believe that they're just made for what culture has told them to be pretty, look good, have children, um, and sit nicely and quiet until your husband gets home and you serve dinner, and that's it. Look pretty, don't talk, make dinner, raise children. So it's sad because I believe that a lot of the change comes from women that, like Victoria and the founders of of Millen and Green. A lot of the change comes from those women. A lot of the change comes from women that had the courage to go beyond the what society expects from them. So now, if we educate ourselves and educate others, these women would have more recognition. More women would take that step also to become more not be afraid of being part of other professions that are not necessarily um, um, socially considered to be female professions. So as we educate ourselves, we also learn to enhance women's capacities. Once again, it's not only a male thing. I believe women have a lot to do. We have to believe in ourselves. We have to believe in our in what we are capable of doing and going ahead and doing it. Just like Victoria did it, just like this woman from Mylan and Green did it, and plenty more women, plenty more. There's a bunch of women out there taking that extra step. They just have to be, they have to be enhanced. They have to believe in their capacities. They have to believe in who they are, in their value. So as we gain more education, as we gain more capacity, we enhance more of those capacities, we believe more in ourselves, we will also open more possibilities for other women to have a place in those male dominating professions. The fact that Victoria is now the a master blender, the fact that this other woman opened their own distillery, that brings that opens the possibility for many other women to start doing the same thing, not only working for them, but open their own business. So it is important. It is important that we educate ourselves, that we believe in ourselves, and in that way we open the possibility for other women. And of course, we must learn to recognize ourselves. We must learn to recognize um, our achievements. That's a main. Extremely important, and that I really like about this article, because it recognizes the the role that these women had in the story of whiskey. So, not being more, I hope you enjoyed this presentation about the article in the Male World of Whiskey. More women are calling the shots. And oh, before I leave, I do want to bring out talking about women that challenge themselves and take that extra step. I was told today about this woman who happened to be the first woman to graduate from an army school. So that's huge, because I mean, more male dominated than the army or the Marines or all those military professions. I mean, I think that's the highest. So that shows a lot of courage. That demonstrates that women are made of enormous capacities, talents, and it just takes courage and belief. It just takes us to believe in ourselves. So that is all. I hope you enjoyed the presentation and have a nice evening.